It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but fate had other plans. 30 minutes before the wedding, the very moment when everything should have been perfect, chaos erupted like a storm tearing through a peaceful harbor. The wedding cake, the symbol of our love and future happiness, lay in ruins on the floor, destroyed with malicious intent by a jealous woman who couldn't bear to see us together. But it wasn't just the cake that suffered. Her actions left behind a scene of utter devastation. Ribbons were torn, flowers scattered across the room, and frosting smeared over every surface like some grotesque artwork of despair. It felt as though a tornado had swept through the venue, leaving nothing but ruin in its wake. I stood frozen, staring at what remained of the centerpiece of our celebration. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it echoing in my ears. Panic clawed at me from all sides. How could this happen? Why now? And how was I going to fix it? Time ticked away mercilessly, each second stretching into an eternity, while the weight of responsibility crushed down on me. If I didn't find a replacement cake within the next hour, not only would the wedding fall apart, but I'd also lose my entire month's salary due to breaching the catering contract. That money wasn't just numbers on a paycheck. It represented months of hard work, late nights, and sacrifices. Losing it meant losing everything I'd worked for up until this point. And yet, even worse than the financial blow was the thought of disappointing everyone. My fiancé, our families, the guests waiting eagerly outside. They had come here expecting joy, perfection, a day they'd remember forever. Instead, they'd witness a disaster, one caused entirely by someone else's spiteful jealousy. Every glance toward the shattered remnants of the cake reminded me of the stakes. Failure wasn't an option, yet success seemed impossible. Where would I even begin? Who could possibly save us now? With the clock ticking down mercilessly, I jumped into the car alongside my friend, more like a reluctant accomplice, who gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled determination. "We need that cake!" I shouted over the roar of the engine as we sped through streets choked with traffic. The city seemed to conspire against us. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every honking horn amplified my growing anxiety. At one point, we narrowly avoided colliding with a massive delivery truck. Its driver leaned out of his window, yelling profanities and shaking his fist at us. But there was no time for apologies or explanations. We were racing against fate itself. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, we screeched to a halt in front of a small bakery tucked away on a side street. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear myself think. We burst through the door, startling the owner, a stout man with an air of exaggerated self-importance. He stood behind the counter, arms crossed, surveying us with a smug smile that made my blood boil. "Ah, you must be here for the masterpiece," he declared, gesturing grandly toward a towering cake displayed under a glass dome. His tone dripped with arrogance, each word laced with mockery. "This isn't just any cake. It's perfection incarnate. The cream is crafted from the finest ingredients, the design meticulously hand-painted by yours truly." As he spoke, his voice grew louder, almost theatrical, as if he were performing for an invisible audience. Every boastful sentence drove another nail into my already fraying patience. I forced myself to stay calm, reminding myself that this was no time for pride. "Can I try it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. The baker raised an eyebrow skeptically, but eventually handed me a tiny fork. With trembling hands, I took a bite, and immediately regretted it. The sweetness hit me like a sledgehammer, overwhelming and nauseating. The frosting clung to the roof of my mouth like glue, while the sponge layer crumbled into dust, tasting more like chalk than cake. And then came the smell, an overpowering synthetic aroma that made my stomach churn violently. For a moment, I thought I might faint right there in the middle of the shop. Desperation clawed at me. "Please," I begged, turning back to the baker. "Isn't there anything else? Something simpler? Tastier?" But he shook his head firmly, his smirk widening. "If you want quality, you pay for it," he said, folding his arms across his chest. Panic surged within me. Without this cake, the wedding would collapse entirely. I couldn't let that happen. Not after everything we'd been through. Dropping to my knees, I looked up at him with pleading eyes. "I'll do anything," I whispered hoarsely. "Just give me a discount, please." The baker hesitated, clearly enjoying the spectacle of my humiliation. Then, with a theatrical sigh, he relented. "Fine," he snapped. "But you take it now. Or not at all." Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing the cake before he could change his mind. As we rushed back to the car, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. Maybe, just maybe, we still had a chance to salvage this disaster. The tension at the wedding venue was palpable, like a storm cloud hovering just above our heads, ready to unleash its fury. Every passing second felt heavier than the last, suffocating us all with an unbearable weight of anticipation and dread. Inside the bridal suite, my fiancée sat on the edge of her seat, tears streaming down her face as she clutched a crumpled tissue in trembling hands. Her mascara had smudged into dark streaks beneath her eyes, giving her a haunted look. "How could this happen?" she whispered hoarsely, more to herself than anyone else. The disappointment radiated off her in waves, drowning out even the faintest glimmer of hope that might have remained. Outside, the guests were growing restless. Hushed whispers filled the air, some curious, others judgmental, as they speculated about what kind of couple would allow their wedding day to spiral into such chaos. I overheard fragments of conversations. "Didn't they plan anything?" one guest muttered under their breath. Another replied, "Maybe they're not cut out for marriage." Each word stung like a dagger, piercing through what little resolve I had left. My mind raced frantically, searching for solutions, but every thought seemed to lead back to the same grim conclusion. Without a cake, there would be no wedding. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Jacob appeared. A figure so incongruous in his rumpled delivery uniform that he looked more like a stray dog wandering onto sacred ground than a savior. He shuffled awkwardly into the room, carrying the hastily purchased cake like a fragile treasure. His hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and his shoes scuffed as though he'd sprinted miles across city streets to get here. For a moment, silence fell over the crowd, an eerie calm before the inevitable explosion. But when my fiancée saw him, her composure shattered completely. "Who is this?" she shrieked, pointing an accusatory finger at Jacob. "Is this some kind of joke? Are you seriously bringing him here on our wedding day?" Her voice rose to a fever pitch, echoing off the walls. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure whether to intervene or simply watch the spectacle unfold. Jacob froze where he stood, clearly overwhelmed by the sudden attention. I brought the cake," he stammered, holding it up weakly as if offering proof of his good intentions. Before anyone could respond, disaster struck again, in slow motion, almost too cruel to believe. As Jacob stepped forward, his foot caught on the edge of the carpet, sending him stumbling forward. Time seemed to stretch infinitely as the cake slipped from his grasp, tumbling through the air like a doomed spacecraft before crashing to the floor with a sickening splat. Frosting sprayed everywhere, coating the pristine white tiles in sticky sweetness. Decorative flowers and sugar figurines lay scattered like debris after a catastrophe. For several seconds, the room was utterly silent. It was as though everyone present had collectively stopped breathing, unable to process the sheer absurdity of what had just occurred. Then, the dam broke. My fiancé let out a blood-curdling scream, collapsing onto the floor in hysterics. "This is ruined! Everything is ruined!" she wailed, pounding her fists against the cold marble. Around her, the guests erupted into chaos, some shouting, others rushing to clean up the mess, and a few simply walking away in disgust. Jacob stood frozen, his face pale with shock. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. But his apology only fueled the fire. "Sorry?" My fiancé spat venomously. "Do you think sorry fixes this? You've destroyed everything." She turned to me, her eyes blazing with fury. "And you let this happen. How could you trust someone like him?" I wanted to defend myself, to explain that we'd been backed into a corner with no other options, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I knelt beside her, trying desperately to offer comfort. "We'll fix this," I promised, though even I wasn't sure how. Deep down, I knew this wasn't just about the cake anymore. It was about pride, expectations, and the fragility of dreams crumbling under the weight of reality. The chaos of the shattered cake had barely settled when another storm erupted, one far more personal and devastating. My fiancée, still trembling with rage from earlier, turned her piercing gaze toward me. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she took in my appearance, or rather, my lack thereof. I was still wearing the same uniform I'd been in when we scrambled to find a replacement cake, its fabric wrinkled and stained from hours of relentless running around. It wasn't just clothing, it was a symbol of everything she despised at that moment. "How dare you show up like this?" she hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? For me? For my family?" She gestured wildly at the guests milling about, their whispers growing louder as they noticed my attire. "Everyone here is judging us right now because of you. You're supposed to be standing there in a suit, looking like the man I agreed to marry, not some delivery boy." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, each one laced with venom and disdain. "I'm still the same person," I shot back, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fury bubbling inside me. "This uniform doesn't change who I am or what I've done for us today." But she wasn't listening. Her face flushed crimson as she stepped closer, jabbing a finger into my chest. "You don't understand, do you?" she spat. "This isn't just about a stupid cake or a piece of clothing. It's about respect. If you can't even bother to dress properly on our wedding day, then what kind of future are we building together? What kind of husband will you be if you can't meet even the simplest expectations?" Her voice cracked on the last word, betraying the depth of her anguish. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time, they weren't tears of disappointment. They were tears of betrayal. Her next words sent a chill down my spine. "If you don't change out of that ridiculous outfit right now, I swear I'll call off the wedding." The room seemed to freeze once more, every eye fixed on us. Even Jacob, who had been lingering awkwardly near the doorway, shifted uncomfortably. The weight of her ultimatum pressed down on me, suffocating and unyielding. For a moment I considered giving in. After all, what was one small compromise compared to the life we'd planned together? But as I looked at her, I realized something deeper was at stake. This wasn't just about a suit, it was about identity, about whether I could truly be myself in this relationship. And suddenly, I felt a fire ignite within me, a fierce determination to stand by my principles, no matter the cost. Fine, I said, my voice rising to match hers. If you think a suit defines who I am, then maybe you don't know me at all. I'd rather throw away my entire life than lose myself trying to please someone else. Love shouldn't be conditional on appearances or status. It should be about accepting each other for who we really are. If you can't see past this uniform and recognize the man underneath, then maybe we shouldn't get married at all. Silence fell over the room like a heavy curtain. My fiancée stared at me, her expression a mixture of shock, anger, and something else, something almost like doubt. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, as though my words had struck a chord she hadn't expected. But before she could respond, her father stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his tone stern yet tinged with concern. He glanced between the two of us, clearly sensing the tension crackling in the air. Before either of us could explain, I spoke up, my voice firm and resolute. "Sir, I love your daughter more than anything in this world, but I won't sacrifice my dignity or my values to prove it. A suit won't make me a better man, and it certainly won't make me a better partner. What matters is the connection between two people, the understanding, the trust, the acceptance. That's what real love is built on." Her father studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he nodded slowly, as if silently acknowledging the truth in my words. My fiancée, however, remained silent, her emotions swirling like a tempest. I didn't know whether I'd won her over or driven her further away, but I knew I couldn't live a lie, not even for her. As the chaos of the day began to settle into a fragile calm, I found myself standing alone in a corner of the venue, my mind racing with reflections on everything that had transpired. The shattered cake, the ruined suit, the heated arguments. All of it felt like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known how to solve. But through the storm, one truth became undeniable. If I wanted a future worth living for, I needed to change, not just for myself, but for us, for her. The weight of my flaws pressed heavily on me. My stubbornness, my inability to see beyond pride, even my reluctance to fully embrace responsibility, it all added up to a man who wasn't ready for the life we'd dreamed of building together. And yet, as I replayed the events in my head, I realized that this day wasn't just a test of our love. It was an opportunity, a chance to grow into someone better, someone worthy of the vows we were about to exchange. "I can't keep making excuses," I muttered under my breath, clenching my fist tightly. "If I want her to trust me again, I have to prove it." Meanwhile, across the room, Jacob stood awkwardly near the buffet table, his delivery uniform now smeared with frosting from earlier mishaps. He glanced nervously at a young woman, a server who had been helping clean up the mess. Her name was Mia, and she had caught his eye earlier when she quietly offered him a napkin after he dropped the cake. There was something gentle yet resilient about her, a quiet strength that drew him in despite his insecurities. Summoning every ounce of courage, Jacob approached her hesitantly. "Hey, Mia, right?" he stammered, scratching the back of his neck. She turned to face him, her expression guarded but curious. "Yeah, that's me. What do you need?" she asked cautiously, clearly wary of where this might lead. I was wondering." Jacob swallowed hard, his voice trembling slightly. Would you maybe want to go out sometime? Like, on a date? His words hung in the air, vulnerable and raw. For a moment, Mia simply stared at him, her lips parted in surprise. Then doubt clouded her eyes. Are you serious? She whispered, her tone laced with uncertainty. You know what people will say, don't you? About someone like me dating a guy like you. They'll think I'm crazy, or worse, they'll fire me. Jacob shook his head fervently, desperation creeping into his voice. It doesn't matter what they think. I mean, yeah, maybe things won't be easy, but isn't it worth taking a risk for something real? You're different, Mia. I've never met anyone like you. His sincerity was palpable, though tinged with fear of rejection. Mia hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her apron. What if they find out? What if they judge us both? She murmured more to herself than to him. This world isn't kind to people who step outside their boxes. You're right, Jacob admitted softly. But staying inside those boxes hasn't exactly made either of us happy, has it? Maybe it's time to try something new, to fight for what we really want instead of settling for what's safe. Their conversation drifted off as reality crashed back down around them. Guests continued to murmur among themselves, casting sideways glances at the remnants of the disastrous wedding. Yet amidst the noise, I caught sight of my fiancée standing near the entrance, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her gaze locked onto mine, searching, probing, as if trying to decipher whether the man before her was still the same person she had fallen in love with. Taking a deep breath, I walked toward her, my steps slow but deliberate. When I finally stood close enough to touch her, I spoke softly, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. I know today hasn't gone the way we planned. Honestly, nothing about this day has been perfect. But maybe perfection isn't what matters most. What matters is that no matter how messy things get, we choose each other. Not because we're flawless, but because we're willing to accept each other's imperfections. Her eyes softened, tears welling up once more. But this time they weren't born of anger or disappointment. They carried a flicker of hope, a tentative belief that perhaps, just perhaps, we could rebuild what had been broken. Do you really mean that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I've never meant anything more, I replied firmly. I promise to work harder, to listen more, to be the man you deserve, not just today, but every single day moving forward. In that moment, as our hands intertwined and the world faded into the background, I understood what true love truly meant. It wasn't about grand gestures or flawless appearances. It was about acceptance, resilience, and the unwavering commitment to stand by each other through life's inevitable storms. No matter how chaotic the journey became, as long as we faced it together, we would always find our way back to each other. In the end, what lingered in my mind wasn't the chaos of the ruined cake or the humiliation of standing before guests in a stained uniform. It was the realization that love isn't defined by appearances, material success, or societal expectations. It's about finding someone who sees beyond the surface, who loves you for who you truly are, flaws and all. That day had tested us to our limits. The shattered cake symbolized broken dreams, the misplaced pride reflected insecurities, and Jacob's clumsy arrival mirrored how life often throws curveballs when we least expect them. Yet through every catastrophe, one truth shone brighter than ever. Authenticity matters more than perfection. As I stood there holding her hand, Feeling her warmth despite everything, I understood that no storm could tear us apart if we chose to face it together. She didn't care anymore about the suit or the pristine venue. Instead, she cared about me. And in return, I vowed to be better. Not because I needed to impress anyone, but because loving deeply means striving to grow into a version of yourself worthy of that love. Even Jacob's story echoed this lesson. His awkward confession to Mia revealed how vulnerable it feels to bare your soul to someone else, especially when society tells you you're unworthy. But he took the risk anyway, proving that real connections demand courage. When Mia hesitated, fearing judgment from others, Jacob reminded her that staying trapped within societal boxes only leads to emptiness. "What good is safety," he said, "if it keeps you from being happy?" Their fragile bond became a testament to the power of vulnerability and acceptance, the same values that saved my relationship with my fiancé. Looking back, the wedding day wasn't just a trial of endurance. It was a mirror reflecting what truly mattered. If we hadn't faced those trials head on, neither of us would have grown. Love, as I learned that day, isn't about avoiding challenges. It's about enduring them side by side. No matter how insurmountable the obstacles may seem, they pale in comparison to the strength found in genuine understanding and unconditional support. At its core, this story teaches that happiness lies not in grand gestures or flawless facades, but in discovering someone willing to embrace your true self, even when the world tries to dim your light. Some people leave scars, others leave lessons. Burn and reborn stories that break you, then rebuild you.